Ladies and gentlemen, when you choose silence, you're not just choosing the absence of words. You're choosing the presence of clarity. Most people assume silence is passive, that it's weakness or that it's simply nothing happening. But silence is not empty. It's full of answers you've been too busy to hear, full of strength you've overlooked, full of direction that only reveals itself when the noise dies down. Think about it. Every single day we are bombarded with noise, the chatter of opinions, the constant hum of media, the endless dialogue in our own heads. That noise doesn't just take up space. It steals clarity, and clarity is where power lives. When you stop responding to every distraction, when you step back and hold your words, you create a kind of inner stillness. In that stillness, you begin to see yourself more clearly. You notice your impulses, those moments where you might have reacted emotionally, said something unnecessary, or given your energy away without realizing it. Silence gives you a chance to intercept that impulse. It's the difference between a reaction and a response. A reaction is noise, a response is power. And silence is the space that allows that response to form. This is why silence is not weakness. It's self-control. Think of the people you admire most: leaders, thinkers, mentors. Notice how they carry themselves. They don't rush to speak. They pause. They reflect. And when they do speak, every word feels intentional, deliberate, grounded. That's not an accident. That's silence at work. That's the discipline of holding back in order to preserve clarity and strength. It's a reminder that sometimes saying nothing at all speaks louder than any argument. Now, silence also strengthens your ability to listen. And listening is one of the most underrated forms of intelligence. Most people are waiting to talk, not listening to understand. But when you become silent, you become present. You pick up on details others miss. The tone in someone's voice, the tension behind their words, the emotion beneath the surface. That awareness becomes an advantage. It allows you to see not just what is being said, but what is being meant. In silence, you're no longer lost in your own thought. You're observing, absorbing, and learning. That makes you sharper, wiser, and far more prepared than those who never stop talking. Philosophers and spiritual teachers throughout history have pointed to silence as the pathway to wisdom. Marcus Aurelius wrote about withdrawing into yourself as a form of strength. La said, "Silence is a source of great strength." And even modern psychology tells us that when you step into silence, your brain stops processing external noise and begins connecting deeper dots, making more meaningful insights. That's why your best ideas often show up in quiet moments. On a walk, in the shower, sitting alone, the mind finally has room to breathe. And here's the powerful shift. Silence teaches you that you don't always have to prove yourself. The need to constantly defend, explain, or argue is born from insecurity. But when you embrace silence, you step into confidence. You no longer need validation because your validation is internal. You know who you are. You don't have to shout it, you live it. That inner clarity radiates outwards, and people can feel it even without you saying a word. But silence is not about avoidance. It's not about shutting down or withdrawing from life. It's about choosing when and how to engage. Silence is a filter. It teaches you which battles are worth your voice and which are not. It allows you to save your energy for the moments that matter rather than scattering it in 1,000 directions. And that's where the real power lies. Not in constantly spending your voice, but in investing it with precision. The truth is, the world does not reward noise. It rewards clarity. In business, in relationships, in leadership, the one who speaks with clarity and confidence commands the room. And that clarity is born from silence, from taking time to reflect before you act, from choosing to observe before you decide, from listening before you speak. So the next time you're tempted to fill the air with words, hold back. The next time you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause. The next time you want to respond quickly, wait. Because silence is not just the absence of sound, it's the presence of power. And when you embrace it, you begin to realize something extraordinary. You don't always need to be the loudest in the room to be the most powerful in it. Silence doesn't make you invisible. It makes you undeniable. Respect is not something you demand. It's something you command. And one of the most underestimated ways to command respect is through silence. Words are everywhere, spoken constantly, often cheaply. Everyone is talking, trying to prove their point, trying to be heard. But here's the truth. When you can master silence, you set yourself apart. You create a presence that doesn't need to scream to be noticed. You don't compete for attention. You draw it. Think about it. The moment someone falls silent in a room, the energy shifts. People turn to look. They wait. They anticipate that silence has weight. It's not emptiness. It's influence. Because silence creates contrast. In a world where most people rush to fill every gap with noise, the one who holds back becomes magnetic. When you do choose to speak, your words don't just blend into the background, they land. They cut through. They carry power precisely because they are rare, deliberate, and measured. This is why people who talk less are often remembered more. Their silence isn't awkward, it's intentional. It signals control, and control breeds respect. You see, when you don't rush to answer, when you don't feel the need to constantly defend yourself, you send a message. I am not easily rattled. I am not desperate to prove anything. I know my worth, and I don't need to advertise it. That quiet confidence is far louder than any argument. Silence also works as a mirror. When you stay silent, you let others reveal themselves. People often expose their insecurities, their intentions, and even their mistakes, simply because they can't handle silence. They rush to fill it, to explain, to justify. Meanwhile, you observe, you gather information, you understand more than they realize, and that understanding gives you an advantage that words could never provide. Silence becomes a form of strategy. It's not retreat, it's positioning. From a psychological standpoint, silence amplifies presence. The human mind craves certainty, and when someone is silent, it forces others to lean in, to interpret, to wonder. That curiosity builds respect because it gives your presence weight. Think of the most influential figures in history. They weren't the ones constantly shouting for attention. They were the ones whose words mattered because they were delivered with restraint. When they spoke, the room fell silent because their silence had already commanded it. But let me make something clear. Silence is not about being passive, nor is it about disengagement. It's about timing. It's about knowing that respect is not gained by speaking more, but by speaking better. It's about valuing your own voice enough to not waste it on every passing argument or every fleeting opportunity to prove a point. In silence, you teach others that when you do speak, it's worth listening to. Now, many people fear silence because they confuse it with weakness. They think staying quiet means you've lost, or that you're being overlooked. But that's not true. Weakness is when you speak without thought, when you let your emotions drag your words out of you. Strength is holding back until the right moment. Strength is choosing not to respond to provocation, not because you can't, but because you won't waste your energy. That discipline builds respect, not only from others, but within yourself. There is a dignity in silence. It protects you. It keeps you from saying things you can't take back. It shields your reputation from being tied to impulsive reactions. It gives you time to let emotions settle, so that when you do respond, your words align with your values, not your frustration. That's why silence is a hallmark of wisdom. It preserves your power until it can be used most effectively. And here's the paradox. When you stop trying to command respect through words, you end up commanding more respect than ever. People listen more closely. They measure your silence. They remember your restraint. And when your voice finally enters the room, it feels like it carries more gravity than the endless chatter that came before it. Silence turns your voice into a force instead of just another sound. So the next time you're tempted to argue, to explain, to prove yourself, don't hold silent. Watch how it unsettles the room. Watch how it draws attention without you trying. Watch how respect naturally begins to orbit around you. Because the truth is simple. The most powerful voices are the ones that don't speak all the time. They're the ones that choose silence first, and words second. Respect is not earned by the loudest. It's earned by the most intentional. And silence is the foundation of that intention. When you master silence, you don't just gain respect, you embody it. One of the greatest mistakes people make is underestimating how much of their energy is wasted in unnecessary words. Every time you argue a point that doesn't need to be argued, every time you explain yourself to someone who has already decided not to understand, every time you talk just to fill the silence, you are giving away energy, and that energy is the very resource you need for progress, for growth, for the work that actually moves your life forward. Silence is not just the absence of talking, it is the conservation of power. When you choose silence, you redirect your focus. You stop scattering your attention across 100 meaningless conversations and start channeling it into the few things that matter most. It's like light. Diffused light brightens a room, but focused light can cut through steel. Silence is that focus. It gathers what you've been wasting and sharpens it into precision. That's why the quiet person in the room is often the one making the biggest moves when no one is watching. They are not wasting their time defending themselves. They are not exhausting their energy with noise. They're investing it in action. Psychologically, silence creates space for awareness. When you're always talking, your mind is externally directed. You're trying to convince, to persuade, but when you become silent, your mind turns inward. You begin to notice what you're feeling, what you're thinking, what you truly need. That shift in awareness strengthens focus because it forces you to sort through the clutter and find clarity. And clarity is the ultimate fuel for productivity. It tells you exactly where to place your energy instead of letting it bleed out through distractions. Now let's talk about energy. We all know that words carry weight. They carry emotion. They carry intent. They carry stress. Every argument, every defense, every outburst is a withdrawal from your internal bank of energy. Silence, on the other hand, is like saving. It's like storing up energy for when it's truly needed. That doesn't mean you suppress your voice or never express yourself. It means you stop wasting it where it doesn't matter. You stop paying attention to battles that aren't worth fighting. You stop pouring yourself out into conversations that don't build you. Silence becomes your strategy for energy management. Think about the most disciplined athletes, the most successful entrepreneurs, the most influential leaders. They don't allow themselves to be pulled into every debate, every distraction, every noise around them. They are selective with their words because they are selective with their energy. They understand that their power lies not in scattering their focus everywhere, but in aiming it like a laser toward their mission. Silence is not laziness, it's efficiency. It's refusing to waste what is limited and precious. Philosophically, silence also teaches detachment. When you're silent, you are not caught in the constant push and pull of reacting. You don't have to jump at every comment, every opinion, every provocation, and in that detachment, you gain freedom. You free your focus from the grip of other people's expectations and judgment. You free your energy from being consumed by things you cannot control. That freedom creates strength. It allows you to direct your attention toward what you can control, your actions, your growth, your discipline. And here's something to consider. The less you speak, the more you can observe. Observation sharpens your focus even more because it gives you information others overlook. When you're silent, you're watching. You're picking up on patterns, on details, on signals that others are too busy talking to notice. That awareness gives you the advantage of precision. You don't waste energy guessing because you've been gathering the truth in silence all along. The beauty of silence is that it doesn't just conserve energy, it multiplies it. The more focused you become, the more momentum you create, the more you hold back from reacting, the more strength you have to respond with intention. And over time, that discipline compounds. You find yourself not drained by the noise of life, but energized by your ability to stay clear, stay centered, and stay powerful. The temptation, of course, is always to respond, to defend, to talk. But every time you resist that temptation, you strengthen your focus. You train yourself to keep your power instead of giving it away. And the truth is, silence is not about having less to say. It's about having more control over when you say it. That control over focus and energy is what separates those who move with purpose from those who drift aimlessly in noise. So the next time you feel your energy slipping into an argument, pause. The next time you catch yourself explaining something just to be heard, stop. Ask yourself, is this the best use of my energy? Is this worth my focus? Most of the time,
The answer is no. And in that moment, silence will serve you far more than words ever could. Because silence doesn't just protect your energy, it multiplies your power. The ability to remain silent is not just about holding your tongue, it is about mastering yourself. At its core, silence is discipline, and discipline is the highest form of freedom. When you practice silence, you are not only controlling your words, you are training your mind, your emotions, and your impulses. That's what self-mastery is. The ability to remain steady when everything around you is chaotic. The strength to govern yourself before trying to influence the world. Most people believe power is about controlling others, but the truth is, the deepest power is found in controlling yourself. If you can't master your reactions, your emotions, your tongue, then someone will provoke you, manipulate you, drain you, and you won't even realize you gave them permission. Silence changes that dynamic. Silence teaches restraint, and restraint is strength. The less you react, the more control you keep, and the more control you keep, the more powerful you become, not over others, but over yourself. This is why silence and growth are tied together. When you stop reacting to every situation, you give yourself space to reflect, to learn, to grow. Silence creates room for perspective. It allows you to see beyond the surface of a moment. Instead of being swept away by emotion, you step back and observe, and in that observation, you develop patience, you develop wisdom, you realize not everything demands your response, not every attack deserves your defense, not every question requires your answer. That realization alone is growth. From a psychological perspective, silence strengthens resilience. Life will test you, people will criticize you, misunderstand you, even provoke you. If you can meet those moments with silence instead of reaction, you build an inner fortress. You learn that your peace is not dependent on the behavior of others, but on the discipline within yourself. And the more you protect that peace through silence, the stronger and more unshakable you become. Philosophically, silence is tied to humility. When you are silent, you accept that you don't need to dominate every conversation. You don't need to always have the last word. You don't need to prove your intelligence by speaking constantly. That humility is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the recognition that true growth happens, not when you're talking, but when you're listening, learning, observing. In silence, you open yourself to insights you would have missed had you been too busy speaking. You grow because you allow life to teach you, instead of insisting on teaching everyone else. Now let's talk about mastery of emotion. Silence is one of the most effective tools for emotional control. Anger, pride, insecurity, they all demand to be expressed quickly. They push you to speak before you've thought, to react before you've processed. But when you choose silence, you interrupt that cycle. You give your emotions time to settle. You remind yourself that you are not controlled by your impulses, but by your discipline. That's growth in its purest form. The ability to feel deeply without being ruled by what you feel. And this mastery is not just internal. It changes how others see you. When you are silent, you become unpredictable, unreadable, unshakable. People begin to recognize that you cannot be provoked easily, that you will not be baited into arguments, that you are not swayed by noise. That reputation builds respect, but more importantly, it builds trust in yourself. You start to trust your ability to stay centered no matter what the world throws at you. But silence does something even greater. It elevates your capacity for transformation. Growth is not just about discipline, it's about evolution. When you master silence, you free yourself from being trapped in your old patterns. You no longer react the way you used to. You no longer waste energy the way you used to. You no longer depend on validation the way you used to. In silence, you shed the old version of yourself, piece by piece, until what remains is stronger, wiser, more resilient. That is the path of self-mastery. And here's the irony. When you stop needing to prove yourself through words, you begin to embody the very power you once tried to explain. Your presence speaks louder than your voice. Your restraint speaks louder than your arguments. Your discipline speaks louder than your defense. Silence becomes your proof, and growth becomes your evidence. So understand this. Silence is not emptiness. It is evolution. Every moment you choose it, you are training your mind, disciplining your emotions, building your resilience, and strengthening your character. You are becoming someone who doesn't just survive the noise of the world, but rises above it. Because at the end of the day, silence is not just about what you hold back, it's about what you become. And when you can master silence, you don't just grow, you transform. Silence is not the absence of growth, it is the doorway